One thing I like to do is I like to open with a discussion question. And we've been, all month, we've been kind of talking about names and identity and how names and identity help recognize who we are and call us forward into who we can be, right? The first week we talked about the name Holy Covenant and how that was not only a name but a calling or a direction from God. The next week we talked about transitions and how God knows who we are in transitions, and in transitions being rooted in God, like we know who we are. We're a city church, right? There will be a moment when the train comes by and we all stop and breathe. And then last week, I don't know, who remembers what we talked about last week? Anyone? I sure don't. Just kidding. Last week, we kind of continued into this name and identity theme. So this week, I want you to turn to someone nearby and talk about what a nickname you might have had growing up. Maybe something that stuck with you. This can be funny. This can be random. This can be embarrassing. This can be a heart-to-heart trauma dump. Take the next 2 minutes and just chat about maybe a nickname or something fun that you've been called growing up. Okay, do we have any standout nicknames? Okay, Cam, your hand went right up. Pookie, aw. Who called you Pookie? Because it's different if it's grandma or for its ex-boyfriend, right? Uh-huh. Friends, families, okay. I heard someone had a nickname Bubbles. I was excited to hear the follow-up, and she had no follow-up. One time I called this friend, he doesn't live here anymore, but I called him, his name was Victor, and I called him Vicky. You know, sometimes gays like to reach into our close gay friends, but after calling him Vicky for about 6 months, he pulls me aside and says, Seth, I hate it when you do that. And then it was so hard to not call him Vicky, right? Because by that point in time, Victor was then Vicky. But here's the thing about names. They kind of stick, right? Once someone starts calling you something, it sticks, right? And some of them can feel like a blessing, right? Bubbles was probably a compliment, Linda, right? It was probably because you have this like warm and cheery personality, right? Some names can have two meanings as well, like Sunshine, right? Has anyone ever, what's that movie? It's Friday Night Lights, where they call the guy that's feminine Sunshine, or Champ, or sometimes it's just directive, right? How many of you have been called a leader or promising at work, right? Or even better, like she had so much potential. And others feel kind of like wombs, right? Like, has any woman, specifically the women in here, been called bossy, right? Has anyone ever been called lazy or a screw up or too much, right? One time in an annual review at Ernst & Young, the accounting firm, I was referred to as chatty. Shocked. Everyone's shocked, right? But chatty's a word used to describe women to devalue what they say, right? So it felt like a tinge of homophobia, right? And whether we like it to admit it or not, many of us are still walking around with names that someone gave us, whether they meant to or not, right? In his book, The Four Agreements, Don Miguel Ruiz tells the story of a little girl whose mother was having a very bad day, right? Everything was going on at work, she just dropped the groceries, and her daughter was in the backseat singing, right? And as her annoyance grew, in a heated moment, the mom told the little girl, your voice is so annoying, can you just shut up? And that little girl, even though the mom didn't carry that moment, the little girl carried that moment. She stopped singing. And if anyone's known that moment where kids stop singing, it's kind of sad, right? There's a part of you that grieves. Because that little girl began to believe that her voice was annoying instead of beautiful. And the mother wouldn't have even known the impact that her words had when she said them, but that didn't make them any less true to the daughter. And as the daughter grew up, she stopped speaking as much, right? Because the names that were given to her of annoying and having a bad voice mattered. That's actually under the Four Agreement of be impeccable with your words. So that's a cautionary tale for us in those heated moments that what we say might stick. Many of these names that were given to us are names that we never even wanted, right? A few weeks ago, I talked about how my cousins called me Setharina growing up. It wasn't kind, but it was a truth about me as a gay man that I wasn't quite ready to connect with yet, What about a name or label that speaks to a deeper truth about who we are? Several years ago, as my life slipped further and further into addiction, and I continued to hide behind denial and excuses, admitting the truth became harder and harder, even though to the rest of the world it became more and more obvious, right? The weight of that truth was heavy, even suffocating. It felt like a confession of defeat or breaking of my own pride to finally say that I'm an alcoholic, right? I didn't look like an alcoholic at that time. Eventually, I didn't get too far off, but I didn't live under a bridge, and I didn't drink out of a brown paper bag, and I most certainly never served in the Vietnam War, right? And so these things were hard for me to accept. But the real struggle wasn't just in the admission, right? The real struggle was in the knowledge that when I admitted that I was powerless over drugs and alcohol and that my life was unmanageable, that I would then have to do something about it. How that simple admission would change everything around me. We resist naming the things that hold us captive because in naming them, we lose an illusion of control. But here's the truth that we can't ignore, is that transformation begins in a moment of brutal honesty. Without it, there's no movement forward, and you can't heal when you keep things hidden, right? I think that's kind of one of the baseline concepts behind therapy. The truth we can't ignore is that we can't be transformed if we're not honest. We can't wrestle with what we're not willing to name, and we can't heal things that we keep hiding, right? Just because we pretend like the pain in our knee doesn't exist doesn't mean it's going to automatically get better. So that's the heart of today's message. That real transformation happens when we take time to be honest, when we allow ourselves to face truth about who we are and where we've been. So let's talk about Jacob, right? Jacob spent his whole life pretending, manipulating, deceiving, right? He lied to his father. He stole from his brother. He schemed his way through life to get a blessing. Now he's about to face Esau, the brother that he did so wrong. And so he sends his family across the river, and he's alone. And suddenly he's jumped, right? Like he's sleeping in the dark next to a river, and all of a sudden he's jumped. It says, a man wrestled with him until daybreak. That sounds like a really long fight, right? In a past life, I've been in a fight, and it most certainly didn't last for hours. It was exhausting in like 10 seconds, right? So we don't get a lot of detail, but we know that it was intense. We know that it was long. We know that it was physical. We know that this fight was real because real things happened, right? It wasn't a fight with his demons or something like that. But eventually, Jacob realizes that this isn't just a man. This is something holy happening. How crazy and scary would that realization be? Oh, wait, I'm not wrestling with a random person trying to steal my stuff. I've been wrestling for 5 hours with God. And so when he realizes that, he goes, I won't let you go until you bless me. So in this deep fight, in this deep struggle, in this deep pain, he realizes it's God, scary, and then he goes, oh wait, it's God. I want a blessing. I'm demanding a blessing. I'm demanding the transformation. How many nights have we all spent wrestling with God over who we are and how to move forward? I know I have. Then comes the question that changes everything. God asks, what is your name? This is the first time that Jacob has been asked his name since he lied to his father and said, I'm Esau, and stole the blessing, right? So being asked what his name is kind of a big deal. So how many nights have our wrestling including thinking we could trick God? Thinking if we just lied a little harder to ourselves, maybe it would become a reality. But now, in the dark, limping and exhausted, he comes to terms with the truth of who he is and says, I'm Jacob, I'm the liar, I'm the deceiver, and I'm the stealer, the trickster. I'm the one who runs instead of faces the reality. When he confesses to being Jacob, he confesses not just to a name, but to an identity. And this is the moment where his transformation truly begins. God tells Jacob, you will no longer be Jacob but Israel, because you've wrestled with God and humans and you have prevailed. He didn't beat God, right? He prevailed in the moments of wrestling with himself. Because here's the truth, that God doesn't rename perfect people. They work just fine, right? God renames honest people. And let me say something that you might need to hear today, is that our identities are not forever tied to our worst mistake. Our identities are not forever tied to the trauma that we carry in our minds and bodies. And our identities are not what people tell us they are. It's who it is with God. But we can't deny these truths in order to live lives that are happily and usefully whole. Maybe the truth is that what all others told us simply isn't true, and only in the wrestling can we find what others told us wasn't true. Only in the wrestling can we get to the point where we unpack what other people told us about ourselves. Some of us were told that we were worthless. Some of us were told that we were broken, and only in the wrestling can we find that that's just simply not true. Some of us were told that God could never love someone like us. But hear me, you are not what other people say about you. You are what God says you are, right? And we're created in the image of God. And I don't think God struggles with self-worth, right? And so if we recognize that we were created in the image of God. And truth be told, many queer theologians have seen themselves in this moment with Jacob. Think about it. The wrestling happens in the dark, happens in the in-between space, the liminal space. The stranger won't give a name. The stranger that Jacob wrestles with is ambiguous and unidentifiable. It's bodily, right? It's physical, and it's a little intimate. There's some X-rated readings of this. And Jacob walks away wounded. Jacob walks away renamed, and Jacob walks away blessed. So for many people living in a world that wasn't designed for any of us, the story of Jacob wrestling with God to determine who he is and who he's called to be, despite his past that he carries with him, is more than a metaphor. It's a story of survival. So let me pause here to say this story of Jacob's wrestling in the dark has meant something special to many theologians who wrestle with queer topics. And it holds a special meaning for this church, too, because Theodore Jennings, a groundbreaking theologian who wrote about sexuality, embodiment, and biblical justice, was a member here at Holy Covenant UMC. Oh, not a member. His wife is most certainly a member of Holy Covenant. In his book, Jacob's Womb, Homoerotic Narrative in the Literature of Ancient Israel, Jennings offers a bold and intimate reading of this text. He writes, the struggle is not merely with God, but with the self. And in the struggle, the self is marked, even disfigured, yet transfigured. It is the womb that Jacob receives a new name. So it is in the womb that Jacob receives the new name. It is in the pain that we carry with us. It's in the battle scars that we receive the new name that carries worth and dignity. Jennings even uses the term transgendering to describe this transformation, not in terms of gender identity alone, but as a sacred crossing over of identity where someone becomes fully themselves through a divine encounter that embodies struggle. So this is not a tidy blessing, right? This doesn't look like if you come to the front to get anointed and sent along your way. This is a transformation that hurts. It's a transformation that scars, and it is a transformation that gives us a name. And as for many of us, this story rings true. Like Jacob, we've wrestled with God, with the church, with family, and with shame. We've been told we couldn't be loved just as we are. We've been forced to fight just to name ourselves truthfully, but like Jacob, we hold on. We refuse to let go without a blessing. And God doesn't say, how dare you wrestle with me, right? God doesn't have this like fragile human ego that resists being questioned, right? That's not God. That's us applying our ego onto God. When we bring our doubts and our fears and our hurt and our questions to God, we bring our whole selves. We are trusting God with our messiness and with our confusion. So when we trust God with it, God can take it. Cry to God, scream to God, curse at God if you need to, or howl at the moon, and God will receive your emotion and your energy and those things that you can't even say out loud. Because God can take it. I actually learned this lesson from a former congregant who he went to seminary and struggled with a terminal illness. And he said, God can take me being mad, even if it's at God. So when we wrestle with God, God says, you get a new name. And this new name isn't always the name that the world gave us. It's not the one that shame whispered in our ear, but the one God speaks over your life. And God says it tenderly, truthfully, and powerfully. Let's not skip this part, though. And Jacob limped away from this place because the limp matters. Because real transformation often leaves a mark. Not because God punishes us, but because the struggle shapes who we are. Ask any alcoholic that got sober. Their lives might be transformed, but securing housing or getting a job with a record or a clean bill of health from a doctor are rarely easy and often not possible. The journey to get us where we are carries some stuff with us. We carry our becoming in our bodies, and that healing doesn't erase the fight, right? That healing actually shows how strong we were to carry through it. It honors it. We often leave the transformation with a little limp, but that limp can be a victory. And let me tell you something I heard recently after a 12-step meeting. This guy was sharing about his past, and he wasn't sugarcoating it. And if anyone has any friends in recovery, do they ever say things that make you clutch your pearls? Or am I just the one making everyone clutch their pearls? But this guy was talking about the drugs, the lies, the jail, the regret, like all of those things that good, proper people aren't supposed to talk about. And as he finished talking from across the table, someone with many, many, many years of sobriety nodded and said, yeah, but we don't have to live that way no more. That wasn't denial, that was resurrection, right? The limp carries the healed scars that we don't have to keep reopening if we don't want to. It was saying, I know who I was, but I also know who I am becoming. And I've got a limp, but I've also got a blessing. Revelation 2:17 says, there, to the one who overcomes, I will give a white stone, and on the stone a new name will be written, which no one knows except the one who receives it. In the ancient world, a white stone meant something, right? It was a token of acquittal in court. It was an invitation to a feast. It was a mark of identity or victory. Those are three pretty big things, right? Imagine getting acquitted in court and getting invited to a party and winning. Gosh, a gold medal, a wedding invitation, and a pardon, all in one piece of stone. So what is this new name for each of us, right? It might be the exact same word with a different meaning. When you're a junkie on the street saying I'm an alcoholic means something different than when you're 10 years sober, right? So this word can't be things like I'm a mistake or I'm broken. It's a name that only you and God truly know the meaning of. And the name is already written. It's already waiting. And if you have to, and all you have to do is wrestle. All you have to do is hold on, and all you have to do is walk forward with your limp and all. And just like with ourselves, our community can feel the same. If we wrestle with who we are in relation to God, if we name the hard truths about ourselves, only then can we truly live into the calling that God has for us as a community. So let me ask you, if God handed you a white stone today, what name would be written on it? Would it say beloved? Would it say brave? Would it say honest? Or maybe it would say free. Maybe it would say becoming. Because every saint has a sinner, or every saint has a past, right? And every sinner has a future in the kingdom of God. And we don't live that way no more, the way that carried with us. We're going to end today with a little invitation. It's going to feel like an altar call, but I swear it's not. It's more of receiving a white stone. So here at the front, we've got some sticky notes, the 2025 already in the office, no need to buy new supplies equivalent of our white stones, right? So during the response song, we'll invite Andrew up. When we're ready, if you feel called, come forward and take a little sticky note, take a piece of paper, and write honestly what you feel God is calling you forward to on it, right? What name is God whispering for you today? What vision do you have for your future that God put on your heart? Not the name your shame gave you, but the name that God gave you. Not the name that people want to harm you called you, but the name that you feel called to be. The name God has placed on your heart. And you can take a picture of it if you want to pray over it this week, but I'm going to invite you to put it up on the prayer wall so that we can pray over it this week, right? We can pray over your hopes and your dreams and your direction. And let this prayer remind you every day that we are not the people that that the world says we are. We are not our past. We are not done. We are being renamed, we are being made anew, and we don't have to live a way that we used to live anymore if we're willing to do the wrestling and the searching. Amen.